Today I'm taking a look at the T-26E4 Super Pershing. This is a Tier 8 American Medium Tank Premium, which is one of the oldest Tier 8 premiums in the game as far as I recall. It's a fairly slow vehicle with very tough frontal armor, but the side armor, you never really want to side scrape in this machine because it just doesn't really appreciate it, because it doesn't have the side armor to really survive a lot of hits. I'm trying to think of the best comparison to this thing, and probably the best comparison I can think of is to the the French single shot heavy tanks. You want to use the frontal armor while avoiding showing the side armor if at all possible. Like, that seems to be the best way to get the most out of this machine in most circumstances, because if you're showing the side armor in this machine, you're usually going to get panned because it just doesn't really have the side armor to really survive getting hit in the side by some of the higher caliber guns you're going to come up against. Because I believe the frontal side armor, like up to about here, let's see, so from here to about here is about 76mm, and then the rear section is about 50.8. So that 50.8 area is the main problem, because you might be sitting at an angle which will bounce shots automatically from the forward side armor, but the rear side armor will still be a weakness, and that will still get panned. Even if you're at an auto bounce angle for one section of the armor, you still have the weak area of the armor to contend with. So it makes it a bit more tricky to really gauge the exact amount you should angle to in this vehicle, because the penetration marker seems to give it away these days, unlike it did in the past, where it didn't give away that the rear armor was weak. So it's a bit trickier to really get the most out of this thing when side scraping, in comparison to just using the sort of, I guess, frontal poke, which is like the best thing to do with this machine now. Because if you go around a corner, say like this, like at this sort of angle, and just expose the front armor without just exposing the front drive wheel, that tends to be the best way to get the most out of this machine. Because if you are able to go around the corner without exposing the front drive wheel, that will mean you can't be tracked, and you've also got your strongest armor angled towards the enemy to make it so it will be as difficult as possible for them to pan you. So that's pretty much the best way to get the most out of this thing's armor, from my experience at least. Your experience may differ. Like, I have seen some people try to reverse side scrape in this vehicle, which for some people does seem to be fairly effective. I just find that's a bit too risky in this machine, because it just doesn't have the fuel tank health to really justify it. Because if you don't know a thing about this machine, the fuel tank is in the rear, and the fuel tank does not have much health. And because it doesn't have much health, it means you get set on fire very, very easily, and, well, fires aren't good. So if you can, you want to avoid fires. Now, another problem with this vehicle is, because it's a fairly old vehicle and everybody knows it, it does mean that most people tend to know your weak points. And pretty much the main weak points to be aware of on this machine are the cupola on the top, and notice I said cupola, not cupolas, because it has one cupola that's a weak point, and the other one which is a visual cupola, but not an actual armor model cupola. I believe it's this one here which is modeled, and this one here that isn't. So pretty much, if you can see the left hand side cupola whenever you're looking at this thing frontally, then you can pen that. But if you look at the right hand side one, you can't pen that one, because it just doesn't have an armor model behind it. It's a bit of an awkward one to really deal with, because the reason for that is it's a legacy thing, where like the original version of this machine, whenever it was first put into the game, it had like it hadn't got like the second cupola on the armor model, or not on the armor model, on the visual model, and it was added to the visual model with a later version of the tank. So essentially, whenever it was originally put in, are you kidding me, gun? Come on. Whenever the tank was originally put in, it didn't have the armor zone, and then as time went on, it did have that. It did have that there as part of the visual model, but the armor zone was never added on. And I would really like to track that guy, but unfortunately the gun's just not working for me here. And we really should have done a lot more damage to that Object 430 than we did, because that 430 should have been sitting on maybe like 500 health right now. At least I managed to track him, so hopefully people will be able to put some damage into him. And it'd be nice if we could finish him off here. Nice. Because that 430 was going to wind up being a massive pain in the ass, because 430s, like, it's pretty much a heavy tank that can go 50 miles an hour. Or not 50 miles an hour, 50 kilometers an hour. So it's pretty much just a T-54, but in some ways better. It's very, very annoying to fight against. So if I can kill one of those things, I will. And from my experience driving it, if it's driven by someone who has learned how to play it, Jesus, it's like a force of nature. And it's a vehicle you don't really want to fight against if you can help it, because its armor is just incredibly tough. Now, the one thing I'm wondering here is where exactly would their artillery be at this point? Oh, well, that answered that question. So, if we can kill that artillery, that would be nice, and I'm hoping we can just sort of get over the top of these rocks. Try and push forward a little bit further, and I hope our artillery is able to finish off theirs. Okay, never mind, the 430 killed him. I was confused for a second there. It took a second to register what exactly happened. And just finish off T-71 CMCD. But the 430 finished off the artillery, which means we'll hopefully be able to just kill off these enemy vehicles in front of us. And gradually roll up behind the enemy tanks that are up here. And I will kill you if I get the opportunity. Oh wow, I hit him. Didn't pin him. That's annoying, because usually that tank would be pretty much guaranteed pen. One thing I'm glad to know about that vehicle is that it has very, very bad gun depression. Like, I'm so happy that I know about that, because otherwise I would have just crapped myself with one of those things rolling around the corner in front of me. Because that tank there is, well, known for having a very potent gun, because it's pretty much a Jagdtiger gun on, well, I guess a Panzer IV chassis. And a Jagdtiger gun, like, no matter what chassis it's on, is going to be very, very, very painful to get hit by. And I'm just hoping that this wheeled vehicle here to my left will push forward towards these guys and potentially distract them a little bit. Because if he can, then that will put us in a better situation to try and deal with these guys. Oh, and there's a little PTA down. Oh, right, okay, so those guys have all fallen back now. See, I was worried about getting killed potentially by a lucky shot from the P-44 Pantera. But pretty much just to go over, like, while I'm trying to push forward here towards these guys, trying to get a little bit more damage, go over the weak points. So, whenever you're raising the gun into the air in this thing, you're actually exposing technically less sort of cheek armor to expose, because this armor here is armor people will go for all the time. Because it's effectively just a stock Pershing turret in that area. And the Pershing turret, the only real area that will bounce shots is the gun mantlet. If you don't hit the gun mantlet, then you're pretty much going to pan. That's pretty much the standard thing with the Pershing. Now, when it comes to this vehicle here, in comparison, like, the spaced armor will allow you to bounce shots from vehicles you maybe wouldn't expect, but it's one of those things where, like, if you don't hit the spaced armor though, it's still just normal Pershing armor. So pretty much you're gonna get penned back with no real problem. And it'd be nice if I could actually finish this off with a top gun. I just noticed I'm in a position to potentially get one. But the question is, like, will somebody else do a little bit of damage to this Caernarvon Action X? And that was a very, very interesting move by the what you call it, by the wheeled vehicle. And I actually did manage to finish off with a top gun. That was nice. 2300 damage. Wasn't the greatest game ever, but I think I had a decent role in that game, considering, well, I mean, I am in a preferential matchmaking premium, and that was probably some of the worst matchmaking I could potentially get. Now, don't get me wrong, there are worse matches to be in, because there were actually tier 7s in that game. But if I was against just tier 9s and tier 8s, that would have been a very, very bad game. But that actually wound up playing out fairly well for the most part. I mean, steel wall just shows off this thing's armor level. And a range, it's weird, like this tank here, like, genuinely, I always played this thing at close range because it generally just felt like the best way to use it. But the armor tends to work a lot better at longer ranges because it just seems to be more difficult to consistently hit the weak points. And as I was saying, like, these areas here, like, that's just normal Pershing armor. That's just normal Pershing armor. And then this area here, this is an area people don't go for anymore. But this area here, if you do manage to get a lucky shot into it, that's just normal Pershing armor. And then up here, I believe it's this one here you can pan. If you hit this area here, then that's just normal Pershing armor as well. And this little, like, sort of mechanism here isn't actually part of the armor model either. and I don't believe this is part of the armor model either as well. And then when it comes to the lower front plate, the lower front plate, it doesn't have the same level of protection as the upper front plate, because the upper front plate, I think the way it used to be set up is it had multiple sheets of spaced armor behind it, like potentially up here somewhere. But the lower front plate, I think, only has one sheet of spaced armor, so the lower front plate isn't as tough as the upper front plate, just due to the fact that, well, I think part of it is because there isn't as much of a gap between the lower front plate and the sort of spaced armor, whereas the upper front plate has a pretty substantial gap. As you can see straight through this area here. The vehicle, it still holds up to an extent, but it's a vehicle that's difficult to recommend to people because it's very, very slow. And these days the game is a lot more mobility based than it used to be. And even though this tank is more mobile than it has ever been, because, well, it used to have a 510 horsepower engine with a 51 ton tank, so it had literally a 10 horsepower per ton ratio less if you had equipment on it. Yeah, it made the tank a lot less usable than it is now. And having about the 12 kilometer an hour, or not 12, having about the 12 horsepower per ton ratio it has now has helped this machine out a lot, and it means it's able to actually keep up with the fight, whereas before it got to the fight happened, and then that was your game. Like, if you even managed to make it to the fight, I should say, because if there was a hill involved, then that fight was either going to come to you very quickly, or it was never going to get to you.